Hello, my name's Yorkshire Kris, and this is Exotic Gardening Live, and it is a beautiful evening. It's still light now. I can look out the window and actually see, because the light is the nights are short, the days are long, and it's Easter Sunday. So happy Easter to everyone watching this live. I've not had a lot of time in the garden, to be honest, over this extended weekend, because I've been doing lots of DIY in the house. So tonight on this show we're going to answer a few questions and talk about jobs to be doing in the garden right now. So let's get started. So I think I'll start off basically by saying I haven't had much time to do anything in the garden this weekend, but I've got a big long list of jobs I really need to get started with. And one of the main jobs at the moment is actually watering plants both inside the greenhouse and now in the garden. So it's getting to that time of year when we've had a bit of warm weather and things like tree ferns and anything in pots need lots and lots of water because it's pretty warm. It's been up to about 21 degrees. We've had 16, 17, 18, 19 degrees and then a couple of 21 degrees in the last week, and the nights haven't been frosty at all. It's been sort of down to 4 or 5 or down to 10 degrees. So it's been a good week, good growing week, and the pots have been drying out really quick. So I've been watering a lot of the pots, pretty much all of them, every other evening, and the greenhouse as well. All the seedlings in the little tiny seed trays, they don't hold that much moisture because there's not much volume there, and when it's warm in there they dry out really quickly. I've been going in every single day and actually watering all those, and plants are growing well now. Now we've got longer days, intense sunshine, or more intense sunshine than we did have in February and March. Plants are really starting to put on some proper growth. And that sort of brings you on to the next sort of topic of things to be doing now, as well as watering, is actually thinking about feeding plants, because things like I said, they're wanting to grow now and they need the food, the energy to do that. And obviously they get loads of energy from the main source, which is the sun, and the photosynthesize get energy that way. But to help them along the way, obviously they need water and they need those micronutrients and those sort of growth stimulants as well. So we use things like seaweed fertilizer, which is basically just helps things grow quicker and get all those nutrients they need from the soil as well. So I do like to get a bit of the concentrated seaweed fertilizer, put a little bit into a watering can, and when I go feed all my plants, water my plants, I'm feeding them at the same time. And that goes now for pretty much everything. Can have a little bit of a light feed, nothing too heavy at this stage. We're just talking about, just a bit of seaweed fertilizer at this time of year for things in pots, and even small seedlings, if it's very dilute, can benefit after a few weeks in the seed tray of growing from a little bit of fertilizer as well. So other things to be doing at the moment is also sort of thinking about jobs that you should have done over winter and early spring, and thinking this could be, the last time to get things moved. And what I'm talking about is plants which you should move when they're dormant. So I've got in my front garden, for instance, I've got a paulownia, so the tree which has huge leaves if you coppice it down to the ground in spring, the foxglove tree, and we grow it in the tropical garden for its huge leaves. Generally, if you just let it grow, it grows into a big tree, has nice leaves, and it has, in February, March and April, sort of purple foxglove-like flowers at the top of the tree, and it'll grow into a substantial tree. But what you can do is coppice it, cut it really hard down to the ground every spring or over winter, and then what will happen is it'll get 2 or 3 buds will form. You can rub off a couple of buds, so you're left with 1 or 2, and that will grow a huge stem, and off that will get absolutely enormous leaves. Now, I've got one in the front garden that really it's getting too big for where it is. It needs to be planted somewhere else. So I wanted to overwinter, actually dig that up, move it whilst it was completely dormant, and put it somewhere else in the garden. Well, actually now, because of this warm weather we've had over the last week or so, it's started to leaf up now, so there's lots of buds forming all over. So it's getting to the point where it's probably a bit too late. If you've got one in the garden now and you've had it for 2 or 3 years just to let it grow, you can coppice it, cut it down, and let those new shoots grow, and you'll get absolutely enormous, enormous leaves by midsummer. So yeah, any sort of dormant plants are not going to be dormant for much longer. If you look around generally in the countryside, pretty much everything's leafing up now. You've still got a couple of deciduous trees that haven't fully leafed up yet, but most things are moving now. The sap's rising in plants as well, so when you do cut plants and prune, you might notice the sap sort of coming out at the top as well. That shows that there's literally the sap's moving through the plants, taking energy from the roots in the ground and moving up and trying to promote leaf growth above ground. So plants are moving and growing all across the country and all in people's gardens, in greenhouses and everywhere. So it's a great time now to be out in the garden and sort of enjoying the growth of all the plants and all the spring flowers as well, and start thinking about potting on seedlings if you're doing that sort of growing as well. And if you've been watching TV over the last couple of weeks, if you watch gardening programs like Gardener's World, you'll see there's been some great gardens on there, as well as traditional gardens. A couple of weeks ago, they had a really wonderful, I think it was in Birmingham, like triangle garden, loads of exotic plants in. That's well worth checking out. If you've not watched that episode of Gardener's World, go back a couple of episodes and watch that, especially for that triangle garden, because some amazing tropical planting, especially for the summer bedding out there. Some really nice ideas you can take away from that. And then this week's last episode, there was the houseplant feature, which was very good. The guy from Salford who had some amazing houseplants hanging from the ceiling and things like that, which was really inspirational. I grow a few houseplants in my house, but not on the scale that that guy was growing. It was pretty incredible, really. But then, funny enough, if you watch Beech Grove, those gardeners in Scotland watching this will probably be aware. You can watch Beech Grove anywhere in the UK because it's on iPlayer. They presented that, and it was heavy snow, proper snow. So it does show you the weather can be very changeable and very different depending where you are in the UK or where you are in the world, because you might be watching this from anywhere in the world. But here in the UK, it's really changeable over just a few 100 miles or less than that. We've been basking in warm sunlight in England, nice warm weather, and up in Scotland, obviously they might have recorded it a few days ago, but they've got proper heavy snowfall. So it does show you the variation from snowfall to t-shirt weather in the sun further south. So let's have a look at a couple of questions, and then we'll do some more jobs to be getting on with in the garden as well. So I'm lucky to make this episode because I had my tea a couple of hours ago and I was properly choking on my dinner. I literally could not breathe for about 30 seconds, so I was a bit worried for a while, but I managed to pull through and get it down. So I'm here to carry on with this program, although my voice is a bit hoarse after basically choking for a while. So happy Easter everybody who's left a comment and watching this evening. Hello to everybody who's left a comment, and let's see if we've got any questions to answer so far. So yeah, we've got one from Mint Cake. Hi Mint Cake, happy Easter to you. Got some elephant ears growing on your windowsill, and the leaves have started discolouring on the edge, and now the whole leaf has turned yellow. You know what could be wrong? Yes, so this depends when this has happened. It could be, if this was a few months ago, a few weeks ago, I would say it's going dormant for winter because it's lack of light. That's the main reason that they go yellow, is basically they're going into dormancy because there's not enough light, or there's not enough water, or it's too cold, and they're just basically keeping all the energy in the bulb, and the leaves are just sacrificed that way. That's the normal reason they're sort of looking ill and discolour over winter. But now we're into spring, and like I said, the sunlight's getting strong now. It's strong enough to start getting a tan outside if you do tan easily, and it's strong enough for the plants to be in active growth if it's warm enough all around the clock, which obviously they are if they're indoors. So if it's discolouring now and you're losing leaves now over the last week or two, I mean, there's a small chance it's delayed dormancy, so it was basically going dormant a month or so ago, and it's just showing that now. Or it could be that you're overwatering. So, although the plants are going into active growth now, some colocasias or alocasias, I'm not certain which one it is. You talk about it being an elephant ears. Alocasias and colocasias are often referred to as elephant ears. It could be that it's been overwatered or sat in water for too long, and you might get a bit of root rot. Some alocasias and colocasias are a bit more fussy than others. Obviously, when they're really true warm tropical conditions, they can withstand a lot of water, especially colocasias, because they do like the damp conditions. Some actually grow in bogs and in sort of water. But when it's this time of year in the UK, most of them don't want to be sat in water. They like to be well watered, but don't really want to be sat in water yet. Maybe in the middle of summer, at height of summer, they can deal with a lot of water. And I've grown them in ponds before for some colocasias. But alocasias don't want that much water. They like a free draining mix. It could be that your mix is not free draining enough and you've watered them too much, potentially. Or it could be, like I said, a bit of delayed dormancy, but that's probably not the case. It's probably likely that it's been overwatered. Or the opposite, you've not watered it enough, and obviously leaves can die off that way as well. So yeah, I agree with you, Palm Exotics UK. The weather has been fantastic this Easter. We couldn't ask for more, could we really? It's been dry every day. It's been warm enough to get out and get on with jobs. Like I said earlier, I've not been able to because I've been doing my DIY in the house that I just had to get done. So I've just been looking out of the window, hoping to get out for a few minutes, but not really had the chance other than doing the essential watering in the greenhouse. Okay, next question is from Vintage Fixture and Plant Guy. That's a good combination. What palms are you planting out this year? So this year I'm hoping to plant out one of my Boutia Jabea crosses, because over the last couple of years I did lose a mule palm in the garden, and it looks like my Boutia catenariensis have also died from the previous winter. I've left them in all last summer, left them in this winter. I'll give them probably a few more months, see if there's any growth in those, because it can take ages to show new growth after being set back. I think they've probably bit the dust, to be honest. So I'll be planting in their place a Boutia Jabea cross and a hardier mule palm, which is a cross of a Syagrus palm cross with a Boutia. So I'll be growing those two nice feather palms in the garden where the other two palms have basically perished. Hopefully, anyway, that I'll get that done this spring. But there's so many jobs to be doing in the garden, just general jobs, but then new projects, changing parts of the garden, planting new areas as well, and as well as propagating. So propagating is a big thing for me, because obviously every spring I have a hardy backbone of evergreen plants in the garden, but I do like to plant out loads of stuff I grow from seed and cuttings. I need to propagate a lot of those sort of now in spring, so that they're big enough and bulky enough to plant out next month in May and into June, so that they grow really quickly and have a really good sort of vibrant, colourful display of big exotic leaves and flowers for July, August, September and October, which are the main months for my garden to look at its best. So other things to be doing in the garden are sort of looking after plants that have, come out. So we've had this warm weather, and obviously it's been a good time to start hardening off plants. So we talk about hardening off, which is a process of getting your indoor plants acclimatized and accustomed to being outside, which is a very different environment compared to being inside, where it's still, the light levels are much lower and they're not getting affected as much by sort of movement, like I said, by wind and things. Pests and diseases are limited somewhat inside. As soon as you get outside, they've got all the environmental factors there. You've got wind, you've got rain. Hopefully you haven't got any cold weather on the way. We'll deal with that if it comes. And the sunlight is so much stronger outside than in under glass. So we can't just bring out our plants that have been inside all winter, stick them in the blazing sun and expect them to be fine because it's a warm day. What will happen is you'll get crispy damage to the leaves, and the leaves will basically die because they can't cope with that much sun straight away. They need to be slowly accustomed to going outside. And that even goes, that we're talking about tender plants, but it goes for pretty much anything. If it's been inside for like 6 months or more, and then it goes outside, it will not be ready for that, even if it's a hardy plant. So things like even cacti, if you're bringing cacti and succulents out, obviously they love intense baking sun when they're accustomed to that. If they've been inside, bring them out. Even those plants can show some damage. Might be a bit delayed, but they can show some damage. And you don't want that on plants like cacti because it will never look the same again if you damage, the stem on a cacti, because it will sort of brown off slightly or discolor. So even for things like cacti, with an extreme sort of example, I'd bring them out into the shade for a few days before putting them more and more into the sun, because the sun is getting stronger and the daylight is getting longer, and they've just not been used to that for 6 months as they've been through winter and indoors. And it's still too early to plant out for most of us in the UK, because although, as I've been saying, it's been beautiful weather this last week, there's still time for basically the wind to change. We get a cold northerly or easterly wind, and we start shivering, and we get the odd frost. So yes, hopefully we won't have that happen, and you could gamble and plant some stuff out now that you've hardened off, and it might make it through and be well ahead of others that have not, gambled and done that. But you might find that you're bitten by a late frost, which is not the end of the world for loads of things, but for, like I said, slow growing plants that hit by late frost will be damaged for a long time. Obviously, your location. If you've been growing for years, if you're growing in the south or the coast, etc., those caveats that we always talk about, you're probably fine now to be getting away with hardening off now this last week or so, and get planting out a load of stuff. The unsets can be probably planted out, and the sort of tenderish things that aren't truly tropical probably can be planted out now as well, because although the nights are not going to be above 10 degrees, which you need for the truly tender plants, it will drop down to 3 or 4 degrees even in the south over the next month or so on occasion. That won't kill or damage too much the sort of tenderish plants, like your bananas and things like that. But obviously up here in the north of England and inland UK and further north, it's still too early to be planting out everything in their final positions. If you've grown veg in the past and you're new to tropical plants, basically think, would you plant out a tomato plant right now? And if the answer is no, then don't plant out your exotics, because it's still too early. It's still too cold on the night on occasion for the plants to be happy and growing well. I'm just seeing if my screen has frozen, because it looks like it may have. Just double check. Let's check on my phone. Have a look. No, I think we're all up and running. So yeah, where was it? So plants to be bringing out now. I've brought out all my aeoniums, for instance. So all my tenderish plants like my aeoniums I've brought out. I've not put into full sunlight yet. Like I said, I've had them in shade for a few days, and I've brought out a couple, but some of them into more direct sun for a few hours a day now, and they will they will tolerate temperatures down to freezing, but not really below freezing. So that's why I overwinter them in my greenhouse. You can get away with a few of them, but more hardy types planted out or in pots close to the house over winter in a lot of the UK, but it's a bit of a gamble here, so I don't do that. I have done in past. I left out a few actually this winter, and all the ones I left out died. I had multiple ones, so I had some extras I left out to see how cold a winter it was. And it wasn't a cold winter by any stretch of the imagination, but it was cold enough to completely kill the aeoniums I left outside in pots. So that's why I keep, all my collection really inside. But now definitely time to bring them out. I like to bring them out in April anyway, so they have space for other plants that have grown from seed to actually get bigger and potted on. Have space in the greenhouse for those, because aeoniums could have quite a lot, do take up quite a lot of space in the greenhouse. I know that's one of the earlier tender plants I can get outside and can withstand bit of cold and a bit of extra sunlight compared to things like the mousas and cannas, which will suffer a bit more if you put them into direct sunlight without hardening them off. So hopefully all you guys have been able to get out in the garden, unlike myself. So hopefully you've all been doing your jobs. I've been looking on the social media channels and seen some great stuff happening in people's gardens, whether it's been planting new palm trees, making complete new bedding areas, or complete new build gardens and getting started on the structure of those as well. It's been a great time, like I said, to be out in the garden. And my main job when I get some time in the garden is actually going to be sort of propagation. I've got loads of things that I've got in the ground that I want to actually divide and propagate. So one of the main things I like to do sort of in April and into early May is propagate my Miscanthus giganteus grass, which is the huge towering grass that grows to about 3 meters or so, and it grows in a few places in my garden. And I want to divide that before it gets into too much growth. And it's quite tough to divide it. It's got a very tough rhizome underground, so you do need a bit of strength and a bit of a sharp blade on your spade. I'll use my root slayer to do that, to actually get through that rhizome and divide it. So I'll be doing that with the plants at the bottom of the garden. So I've got a bit of extra vigor by just planting one bit and get rid of the dead core, and also I can have some plants to propagate and I'll pop them up and I'll sell them on my open days and give a few away to friends and family as well. And also there's the bamboos. So if you remember 2 or 3 years ago, everybody's bamboo Triskaia gigantea flowered all around the world. It's an event when a bamboo flowers, it generally takes about a year to 18 months of every single specimen of that species, wherever it is in the world, will pretty much flower. So that happened 2 or 3 years ago. Everybody's Triskaia gigantea flowered, and now I've got loads of seedlings all over the garden that are 2 or 3 years old. Some are very tiny still because they've just decided to germinate in a not a good area, basically. Some have sort of germinated on the side of palm trees, believe it or not, in my boot here. Some have germinated in sort of the bark chippings near the sort of the play area at the bottom of the garden, but some have landed on the soil and germinated. So I've got a bed of these Triskaia gigantea bamboo seedlings or small plants now, and there should be some variation. It's still too early to see if there's some variation, but there should be some genetic variation between the individual seedlings. So most will grow like the parent plant, huge, tall, thick bamboo. Some will grow shorter and some might grow taller or have some other characteristic. So I'm going to pot them up over the next few weeks. I'll keep quite a lot for myself to see if I've got some variation of different plants. And then again, I'll be potting loads up, looking after them, watering them, and selling them on the open days in August as well. So, I've got a question here from Joe Zimmerman. Hi Joe, what are your favourite cacti to grow outdoors? So my favourite cacti to grow outdoors are the ones that I can leave in the ground and are hardy. And really, there's not too many of those that are truly hardy, but there's quite a few of the prickly pear puntias that are really hardy. I haven't got any named ones. I've just been sort of trial and error, trying different ones, or I've been given like a pad of one. And there's a couple that have seemed to cope with the location and the conditions we've got in the garden. So a puntia prickly pears, a really good cacti to try, because like I said, some are really hardy. Lots are hardy in terms of cold and go easily down to -10, -15, but they don't like the moisture and the water in winter, so they rot off that way. Whereas some are just tropical and will not survive winter whatsoever. So they're very variable, but puntias are good ones to go for. There are some barrel cactus to try as well. I've tried a couple and they are still very small, and I probably haven't even pointed them out in my videos because they are still very small. Got lots more cacti in pots, which I bring into the greenhouse every winter, and I've brought them all out now to harden off. I'll be bringing them in if we get colder nights, but at the moment they're outside in the shade, cacti in the shade, and then they will go into the full sun over the next week or so, provided it doesn't get too cold. And I grow loads of different cacti in pots. In fact, I think my oldest plants are cacti that have grown from seed. They're still extremely small because they've literally been in the same pot that I sowed the seed in, some 20-25 years ago. So there was been left on a windowsill at my mother's house for about 20 years, and then I've had them for the last couple of years in my greenhouse. So I should really look after them a bit better, but they seem to be pretty much bulletproof. And like I said, they're the oldest plants I think I've got, because I think I sowed them when I was about a young teenager, about 12, 13, something like that. So yeah, they're good. Yeah, good 25, 27 years old now, so they're doing pretty well. And you can grow. So there is some great examples, especially in the southeast, in Essex and places like that, where it's really dry in the UK, and obviously a lot warmer and sunnier, longer summers. And there's plenty of people that have tried cacti, and some have really grown some amazing columnar cacti, some amazing specimens over the years as well. Because as long as it's not too cold in winter, and more importantly, they can be kept bone dry over winter, quite a lot of cacti can do well in the UK. Next question, monkey puzzle trees, do I like them? I do like monkey puzzle trees. I think if they're planted with enough space around them, they can look amazing. These were really popular sort of in Victorian times and then onwards, where people tried to grow unusual plants like we're doing now, but with a hardy plant, this monkey puzzle tree, grown from seed. And now if you look around the country, you've got some huge specimens, really tall, much taller than a house, for instance. And a lot of them do bear fruit as well, so you can get the big pine nuts, which are edible if you can get up there to eat them. So big pine nuts you can get from the monkey puzzle trees. I do like them, but I don't like them when they're planted too close together or with other plants that are just congested. But they are pretty slow growing, and they're very expensive to buy as well. They've gone up in price quite a lot over the last 5-10 years. I don't have the space for them in my garden, so I don't think I'll ever grow in my garden, but I do like them, especially in like parkland settings when they look really statuesque with their sort of very unusual sort of open sort of branches and leaves. And there are some less hardy monkey puzzle trees as well out there, but I think I can't remember the Latin name for the monkey puzzle tree. I think it's a Coria, something like that. I think that's the best one. The hardy one seems to be the most statuesque and robust plant to grow in the UK. Ferns here in Hampstead, do you have any indoor plants? I do have a few indoor plants, so I've got all sorts of the regular things like monstera and things like that. I've got some in the bathroom, some in the living room, and dotted about the house as well. And my daughter's big into houseplants, and she's got loads of houseplants in her bedroom and around the house as well. So quite a few houseplants, and I will probably do a video later on of all different houseplants as we go through the year. But I'm mainly interested in creating an exotic garden and being outside, surrounded by the plants, and trying to get the sort of half-hardy plants through winters, and then getting that tropical feel by having loads of annuals in the summer as well, which wouldn't get through a UK winter. Devon Edwards, do you like lilies? I do like lilies, but I don't like lilies getting eaten by lily beetle. And lily beetle is a bigger and bigger threat to lilies now, and it seems to be absolutely everywhere. So lily beetles are the orange beetles that devour lilies, their leaves and their roots as well when they're grubs, and they defecate everywhere and just make a mess, and they're just awful things that can just shred through a lily plant very quickly in a matter of days. So I used to grow loads of lilies. I actually did a video on tree lilies, which I did basically 10 years ago now. I think it's still one of my most popular videos on tree lilies. Beautiful plants, and I love the scent of lilies. I know some people hate the scent. It can be a bit overpowering if you bring lilies into the house, but outside in the garden I think they're really nice. Next question from Dan Wilson. Have you ever tried the Williamomia pine? I haven't, but I know that there are lots of people that have. And I'm not big into pine trees generally because I don't think they fit too well into my exotic sort of garden. But I appreciate all sorts of plants, and I know there's one literally about half a mile away from here that's been there probably since one of the first ones were regularly available in the UK because it was a plant that was, I think it was rediscovered. I thought it was known in the fossil record but wasn't actually known in sort of modern days. But then they found some of these pine trees in Australia. I think it was something like 94, mid 90s anyway, when they were rediscovered, and they've been able to propagate them, and you can buy them from garden centres now. They do look very prehistoric. They do look different from quite a lot of pine trees, but they do grow well. So, like I said, there's a good specimen now that's very tall, just half a mile away from here. So they do grow well in the UK, which is great to see. Well, that was one thing I wanted to talk about this evening, and that is the if you follow any sort of exotic gardening, tropical gardening groups on Facebook and social media, you've probably seen everybody has been buying their palm trees from B&M this week. So B&M, which for those that don't live in the UK, is a sort of a mix between a household, it's not quite a supermarket, and a DIY shop. It sells a bit of everything. They've got a bit of a garden centre on a lot of their stores as well. And this week they have had a big delivery of very large Trachycarpus fortunii, and they've been selling them at a really good price in the current market anyway, because I think they're about 2 meters tall, maybe a metre and a half up to 2 meters tall, and they are selling them for £150, which is a lot of money for a plant. But if you compare that to the same plants from other places, it's probably less than half price compared to a lot of other places. And so if you want instant impact, it's probably a really good deal, and people have been buying them everywhere and just posting them on social media. And I've seen some really good examples. I've seen some people seeing them where, yes, they've got a lot of leaves clipped off the sides, but they've got a good growth point with some active, good green leaves at the top. And more importantly, I've seen a few people have shared pictures of the root balls of these Trachycarpus fortunii, and the first few that I saw on social media had a big root ball, lots of roots, and they look really healthy. And that's the most important thing when you're buying big palms, is you don't want to buy a palm tree that's literally been just dug up from a field, plonked in a pot, and then sold, because it's not got established roots. It'll have had them all severed when it's been dug up, been stuck in a pot, and if it's not been watered correctly, it'll be basically dying as soon as it's been dug up if it's not been correctly looked after. But the ones I saw from the first pictures had really good roots. So obviously they've been grown at a proper nursery, where they've been dug up obviously from a field, put in a pot, kept in a pot for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and it's got a nice root ball, and that will grow away really well. But then I've also seen some specimens people have taken photographs of, and the root balls basically, like I said, it's not established at all. It's been dug up in the past year or two, and it's just not rooted. It's probably not been watered right, or just been missed a watering regime, or it's just not had a good transplant, and it's basically not got a good root ball. And people have then planted it out, and it's quickly sort of looking like it's wilting or dying just in a matter of days with this hot weather we've had. So it's a bit of a pick and mix, bit of a hit and miss, should I say. So obviously a plant is only a bargain if it survives and does well in your location. It doesn't matter how much it is or isn't. It's going to die. It's never a bargain. So yes, these are great. I would say if you want instant impact and you've got a bit of spare money and you want a Trachycarpus, then this is probably a great deal to go for. But just try and check the roots if you can, and don't buy anything with closed up leaflets or all the leaves looking like a dull green rather than nice vibrant green. It means there's probably something wrong with the roots and it's not a good buy. So try, they are big plants, it might be difficult to do this, but look for the roots coming out of the drainage holes at the bottom, and if you can tease away at the sides, see if it's got active roots all the way around as well. But loads of people have bought these this week, and for a lot of people, they've got a real good bargain. Okay, couple more questions. What spring bulbs did he grow this year, and what do you think worked well with the exotic look? Well, I find spring bulbs add interest to the garden in spring when my exotic garden isn't looking at its most exotic, because I do rely on a lot of summer colour, as I've said a few times. So I think any bulbs look great in spring. It even when you contrast them with palm trees and things, even things like daffodils can brighten up an area and contrast well with exotic plants. But obviously, the more exotic looking bulbs you can grow in spring, tulips, because they come in so many colours, so many variations. You can get the flamed coloured ones and get the nice sort of ballerina ones as well. I've got some big Darwin hybrids because I've planted them very deep. I want them to come back year after year and give me really nice colour, vibrant, strong primary colours. We've got bright red ones. I'm looking out the window because I can still see them out there. Bright red ones and bright yellow ones that will come back year after year, because the Darwin hybrids seem to do that, whereas a lot of tulips dwindle away and don't do a good second or third year from bulbs. So they've been planted deep. I think they'll look good. Add a bit of cheerfulness to the garden at this time of year. And also the fritillaries as well. So the imperial fritillaries, they look very exotic, with their bright yellow or orange flowers all in a circle. I mean, I'm not saying it looks like a pineapple, but the top of it, that tuft of green foliage above the flowers, sort of could be reminiscent of a pineapple flower as well. So they're really good to have in the garden in spring. But like I said, I think any spring bulbs are great to add that colour early in the year. It sort of gets you motivated to getting out and sort of thinking about summer plants to replace the bulbs later in the year as well. Okay, next question from Raj Palmer is about bamboos and golden bamboos sold in supermarkets and places like B&M. Are they worth buying as a starter bamboo? Yes, they can be, but like we've always said with bamboos, we have the clump forming, we have the running types. Nearly always, when you see bamboos sold in sort of supermarkets and DIY sheds, they're going to be Phylostachys. Sometimes there might be Pseudosassa, but nearly always they're going to be Phylostachys. And any Phylostachys bamboo will run eventually. Some will run straight away, some might take a few years to start running. So I think the golden bamboos are all, well, they're all Phylostachys, they're all different golden bamboos, whether it's Aurea or Vivax or any of the other types as well. So I would be hesitant to just plant them in the open ground unless you've got loads of space, without using sort of a bamboo barrier. So you can get like a thick plastic you can use around your plant to stop the rhizomes and the roots getting through, because the spreading bamboos, like we said with the Phylostachys, will spread eventually. Phylostachys aurea, the golden bamboo, which is actually greenish, is quite well behaved, and Phylostachys nigra can be well behaved for a few years and in some soil types, but eventually even those will spread, and some of the other ones will just go crazy straight away. So you've got to be mindful of that. But you can pick them up for a lot less money, and as long as the pot you've got is being well watered, you haven't got shriveled up leaves, and it's full of roots, it's probably going to be a good buy if you want that sort of plant. You have to be careful with bamboos because sometimes they've just been potted up and planted into a bigger pot, but it's only a small plant and a big pot of compost. Obviously, that's not a good deal if you think you're buying a big plant and you've only actually got a small plant. So always check the actual container it's growing in and look for lots and lots of roots, and make sure all the leaves aren't sort of desiccated and dried out, because that shows it's not being looked after and watered enough. They can recover sometimes if they've dried out a bit, but not if they've been dried out for a long time. They will not come back from that. Okay, got a question from JH asking about the big palms are not allowed in. So yes, he's gone back to the B&M thing. So strictly speaking, pretty much any palm tree is not allowed in the UK from Europe or elsewhere without it being in quarantine for a couple of years. You can't just get palms that come via, say, Spain and then shipped straight to the UK a big size, because they're not allowed, because they've got to be shown to be disease free. And the way that's done for the UK at the moment is it's got to be in some sort of quarantine for a couple of years, so in regulated conditions, where it's either netted or kept indoors, and it's got a logged history that it hasn't been out in the open landscape and it hasn't got diseases, and then it's allowed in the UK that way. So I'm hoping that's the process shops have gone through to get the big palm trees in at the moment. It could be that they've got them from a job lot from a palm specialist in the UK, but I doubt it. It's probably has come probably from via the Netherlands and the Dutch nurseries that have been growing them, because they grow literally millions of plants. They're famous for the Dutch bulbs, the tulips we've talked about, but they do grow pretty much all the houseplants that come into the UK, and all the sort of the bigger palm trees over the years have come through Holland as well. So hopefully they've been in that sort of conditions and then grown on in Holland for a couple of years and then brought over to UK with all the correct paperwork. Small palms can come through. It's just bigger palms where they can get sort of different palm weevils and other diseases can get into the plants. So that's why they've got to be quarantined for a couple of years. So a couple more questions before we wrap up this evening. Dan Wilson, have you ever tried QnA australis and Naku palm or any of the cool climate growing palms? So QnA australis I've grown from seed. I mentioned this a couple of times. I've grown it from seed, got it to seedling stage, and the seedlings died, unfortunately. When I bought it as a plant about 5 years ago, I was lucky enough to buy nice plants, and they are quite expensive. I think I overwatered it, believe it or not. I kept it in the pot it came with, and I think from memory it didn't really have much drainage, and I really watered it, and I think I might have killed it with kindness, to be honest, which was really unfortunate at the time. We got through winter really well, and then it was in summer where I brought it out, and I think I just overwatered it and it quickly died. So I'm trying again from seed, but so far my seeds haven't germinated this time. It's a really sort of temperamental palm from seed to get going, but once you get it going, as long as it doesn't get too warm, because it's a cool growing palm tree, it should have a fighting chance, as long as we don't get too cold winters here. And it looks truly tropical. It's a fantastic plant to grow, but very rare in cultivation. It's from the Juan Fernandez Islands in the Pacific Ocean, and it's not easy to get the plants from there, so really it needs to be grown from seed. So last question before we wrap up this evening will be about, have a look. Let's answer this question about chilies. So chilies are tropical plants. Yes, they are fruit vegetable garden plants, but they are, they are tropical. They won't survive winter outside in the UK, and they are perennial as well. So we often grow them from seed, but they are perennial. Keep them frost free, they will come back the next year and get chilies throughout winter, and well, mainly into the next year's growth. And I've grown chilies. Basically, I don't grow chilies from seed, because I know I can pick up a small plant of a selected variety for like £150, £2, and I can have literally hundreds of chilies, well, dozens of chilies on certain varieties, but of the mini chilies you get hundreds of chilies on a plant, and that's what I do every spring. And I just go for what I fancy on the day, to be honest. I like cayenne peppers, chili peppers, and I like the sort of the larger yellow milder peppers as well, and I find them really easy to look after. So they like loads of sunlight, like loads of heat, and I grow them basically in the sunniest part of the garden as well as the greenhouse, and I find them pretty much fuss free. Give them a decent amount of water. They can dry out as well a bit, and they won't completely die, unlike a lot of other plants, and they'll come back pretty well, and they'll just keep flowering in spring and summer and keep fruiting all summer and autumn. So I'm happy to grow chilies in the exotic garden. Got time for one more question actually. Let's have a look. Last question will be from Peter Basham. And he says, we'll be planting out a Gunner Manicata next week. Was told I should bury a drip tray underneath the plant to act as a water reservoir. I water every 3 days. We're not sure if enough. A good idea. Gunners do like lots of water, and you'll often see them growing in boggy ground or by the side of rivers and lakes and things like that. Not sat in the water. They're not, literally water plants. They're more marginal, but they can grow in just general garden soil as well, provided it doesn't dry out at all. So it wants to be somewhere where you're either going to water it absolutely loads all the time to keep it nice and moisture, moisture at the roots, because they grow big, huge leaves, and to keep those leaves pumped up and looking good and growing bigger and bigger, they need loads and loads of water. When I planted mine out, I've put it in an area where it's not completely full sun, so the roots are shaded somewhat and it will keep the moisture in that way. And I also planted it in a bit of a dip, and I used some plastic underneath the root ball on one side so that there'd be a bit of reservoir, so when it does rain and when I do water it, some water won't soak away through the ground. It'll sort of sit there in that plastic and allow the gunner to get that water and keep it growing really well. Provided you don't have a sandy soil and growing it in full sun, you can grow it in general garden soil. I've got good clay soil here. Like I said, a bit of shade helps, and you've got to keep watering it. The idea of putting a drip tray underneath, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by a drip tray in terms of, if you mean like capillary matting, something like that, that won't really help too much. It needs to be something that will actually make a bog-like setting. So you can get some pond liner or old plastic compost bags, put that in the ground before you plant it, puncture some holes so some water can feed through, because you don't want stagnant water, and then put some soil in, plant your gunnera, and then keep that really well watered, and that will grow well as well. They do like a lot of sun to get big leaves, but you don't want it, like I said, a bit of a balancing act. You don't want it to be in an area that's going to dry out too quickly. If you've got a natural bog, you've got some running water in your garden, or a pond which sort of soaks into the side, then that's the ideal location. But like I said, you can make those conditions by putting plastic down and watering really well, and that's what I've done with my Gunnera Manicata. My Gunnera Tinctorias, which I bought before I knew they were Tinctorias, I've got them dotted about the pond, and they're in general garden soil, and I sort of let them look after themselves, and they grow pretty well without too much additional water. They don't grow as big as potentially they could do, but they're still doing well. I do try to look after my Gunnera Manicata more, because it has the more impressive, bigger leaves. Tinctoria still has good sized leaves, but Manicata has the massive leaves, and it is time to feed those plants as well. Talked earlier right at the start about using seaweed fertilizer now, but also the established plants in the ground. April's a great time to actually be putting some organic fertilizer down, so I like to use blood, fish and bone, sprinkle that around the plant but not touching the stem, but actually on the soil, and sort of tease that in a bit, water it in, and that will really help boost plant growth in spring into summer. And I do use that on plants like my Gunnera Manicata, which is nice and established now, and it'll give them extra nutrients to be boosted into big leaves into late spring and into early summer. So that wraps up this edition of Exotic Gardening Live. Thanks for joining me if you've joined me live. If you've started this halfway through, you can go to the edited version where I get rid of the start of this video where I've just been doing the warm-up, and you can watch it on YouTube later this evening from any point onwards. So thank you for watching. Join me next week where I'll be doing more, hopefully, in the garden.